Spreha. I'm extremely delighted to be representing the DDI team today. Guys, we work very hard, when we have the AYIL awards. We work behind the scenes and we make sure that the process is extremely scientific and research-backed so that the people who are finally in the list actually deserve to be in the list, right? So, give me a second. Okay. So, a little bit about DDI. So the DDI story began, I think, 50 years ago. Most of you who've heard of us will know that we are pioneers in the assessment field, right? When assessments were only being done for the military, our founder, Bill Baham, said, okay, let's try this for the corporate world. And our first clients were AT&T and JCPenney. So even though we are known for our very, very, very deep expertise in the corporate assessments world, a lot of people don't know that we also have a very, very strong portfolio in the development field. And today, it doesn't matter whether it's the top-level leaders or the junior or middle level, DDI can be by your side to make sure that we give you measurable development and measurable progress in any area of leadership when it comes to leaders and managers. So today, it's no surprise that People Matters chose us to help them in the process to identify the AYIL winners. Okay? I'm going to take you through a bit of a 7-stage process. This also tells you how rigorous the assessment criteria is. So first, the applicants logged online to the People Matters portfolio website, and they sent in some details and put in an application, kind of an application test. And out of 800, right, Spreha? 800, only about 250 were selected based on that data. So that was stage 1 of the process. The people who were selected, these 200 were the lucky ones who actually got to experience the DDI assessments. Because in stage 2, we took them through the ART, which is the adaptive reasoning test. And this is something that measures the cognitive side of a person's ability. Ability to look at patterns and trends in data, make connections, make good decisions based on your reasoning, right? The people who went through this stage were then taken through a slightly more intensive, very, very popular DDI product called Early Identifier. This product believes that it's not only what a person can do, but a combination of what a person can do, his skills and abilities, and a person's personality and motivation that can really accurately predict leadership in the future, right? So the early identifier was something that they went through, and 50% of the population kind of passed the early identifier. It's quite a rigorous test. The lucky ones who did were taken through a very popular and very immersive day-in-the-life simulation. Some of you have heard of assessment centers that are done a whole day of assessments for senior leaders. We actually provide that experience to frontline and experienced managers. And they can do this. So these guys went through about a 6 to 7 hour assessment where they were assessed on managerial competencies that are backed by 5 decades of assessment center research at DDI. And here's the list of competencies that you see. And they actually were able to almost be like a real-time simulated environment, a very immersive environment, right? And again, almost 50% of the population applicants at this stage, again, were screened. And after that, it got a little bit simpler. So you had the interview round, and we used automated interviews so that they had a pre-selected questions, and they were just able to give in their responses. But they were obviously assessed by assessors. So quite a few of these rounds, the people who were applying and taking the test, please note it wasn't all automatic. The manager ready also is something where they were, I think, certified and trained DDI assessors who were scoring the individuals and their answers, right? The second last round was a mini assessment because we wanted to also assess something that gets left out in manager assessment sometimes, which is business acumen. So we gave them a business case study, again a DDI one, validated and tested for reliability, measures exactly what it's supposed to measure, business acumen in this case. And once all of them went through this, finally they came up with getting grilled by the jury, and the very, very lucky few ones 4 of them, to be honest, made it as the winners. So you can see how at every stage, the last column shows you the success percentage of the screening at every stage. So at every stage, some of them got filtered out. And I don't know what to say. I really am, just beyond words. Congratulations, I think, to, even though they're not here, they know who they are. So big congratulations to all the AYIL 2022 winners. And to the People Matters and DDI team for making it happen. Thank you, people.
Great, thank you, Spriya. And thank you so much for putting it in context that we will not call it post-pandemic, because I think, yes, all of us have faced a lot. HR especially had to evolve and do quite a lot of things. They possibly double-hatted, triple-hatted. Many stories around how HR actually stepped up to help everyone. And there were stories of HR folks telling that there were things which they sometimes couldn't do, right? So we went through quite a lot of bad behind us, but today is a new day, right? So we have Vikramjeet, and we will be just going through few things that HR needs to do for the future. Because one thing, and we have been doing this for last 10 years, there is a study we are doing with HR and business folks. And we asked them one simple question: how do you see HR? Any reactions or thoughts from you? What is the word that business thinks about HR and the word that HR thinks for HR? Any shout outs? Quick one. Right hand, yeah, nice. Strategic, I love that. Any others? Just one more. All right, so we got 3 categories. The first one was a reactor, where business thought that HR reacts to situations and they only provide as and when we ask them for. The second one, and more than 60% of it, was partner. And I'm not surprised, because almost every organization has a HR partner, right? And organizations like us, we are asked to hammer a program on HR as a partner, right? But there was this third category, and that interests many. Only 4% sits in there, and those are the HR anticipators. Folks who look at what's my current business context, how it's going to go further, okay? And how do I strategically look for talent for the organization or processes for the organization? And when we often talk about HR should not have a seat at the table but set the table, let's be honest, guys, that's the way to go. We will have to focus on how do we become the anticipators. So to that, I'm going to turn to Vikramjeet to ask this first question. Do you see that post-pandemic, maybe when we say we rethink, is HR becoming a strategic function who is becoming an anticipator for the business?
Thanks, Amogh, and thanks for outlaying in terms of how typically HR as a function is also viewed. Some of the times it does come as surprise, but most of the times it is anticipated in terms of what those reactions would be. And the pandemic for sure came in as somewhere surprises, but somewhere as a pleasant surprise for HR, because HR played a big role in terms of obviously getting the organization go through that kind of a tough journey. But very, very important is to understand before we answer that question is, when we look at the balance sheets, and I'm taking it away a little from a HR perspective, when you look at balance sheet, these days the valuations happen more as a percentage on intangible assets than the tangible assets. Now, when I say tangible assets, tangible may be whatever you may have as an infrastructure, whatever you may have as your raw materials in certain industries it's people itself, which is service. But very, very important in the value of any of the new startups or a good companies which are growing is actually the people, the culture which is there, and the purpose. And when this is becoming important, is the very fact that the whole thing on which function do you think really deals the most with it is HR. And when you look at HR, this obviously move from typically a service kind of orientation to a strategic orientation is bound to happen by automatic when the movement from a tangible to a intangible assets is moving even in the balance sheet market valuations. And in terms of HR, obviously pandemic taught that in terms of how do you move from typical reactor to sometimes anticipator. Anticipator not to a fact that nobody could anticipate months or years before in terms of the COVID. But a lot of time this happened in China, and a lot of companies and a lot of HR guys were also keeping a tab on it. At least a month or a 15 days before was also anticipation of how company is going to go forward in a short run. Nobody expected 2 years. But that's how, my personal belief is, HR is moving from that function, which is actually from a service to a strategy. However, there is a big road to travel for sure.
Nice. So I'm going to press this a little further because what I would want all of us to take home is, if you're going to be the anticipator, how are you going to develop yourself? So if you had to say 5 things that HR needs to do to be that anticipator for the organization, okay, what are some things that you would advise this group?
Okay. Amogh, frankly, I'll have to jog good a memory lane in terms of 5 things, but what comes to top of my mind very much is, one, you really are good in terms of database decision making. Yes. And especially with the kind of platforms, and the good part is what is TechHR also represents is a lot of companies, lot of new, those stalls and vendors which are actually saying, you have a lot of data points in the employee life cycle. What are you making out of those data points? And therefore you anticipate a lot of things. Yes. Therefore that database decision making is nothing but adding to an anticipatory reaction, which is proactive for a HR as a department, yes, which is very, very important. Second is, however said and done, equally look at, having people first policies, but they to be very, very agile in nature. And because of this database things, how do you really closely look at it at a very short intervals rather than very long intervals of 5 years, 4 years, in terms of thinking about something, saying this is our policy and this is how we go on. Therefore, build on your question with that. Yeah. The third thing is, however all said and done, is keeping the emotional sides pretty live, because in the end, a HR is a trusted partner is only when, even at homes, whom do you trust most is the person who listens to you. Right. And in a marital concept, obviously spouses, and I can see smirks and smiles on faces in that way. So it's a deep listening, which obviously is required, yes, which is also required from a HR side. 3 things which come top of my mind, and
I think
you can add the other 2 if you want in that way.
Sure, yeah. I think this goes back to what Prabhakaran was talking about, and one thing which HR needs to do is, are you parking time for personal development? Most of the time it's taken for granted, and it's not for anyone's fault, but today with the way the business is and things are fast paced, many times we are not parking time for ourselves so we can develop ourselves on competencies that we need to, right? The second one is pick a good mentor, because the mentor will actually guide you in the direction, saying what are some of the things you need to do and how you will have to do it. So I'll just add to these 2, right? Moving to the next one, and this piece again, part of a large research and even our assessment data. So when HR is at the first line manager level, what you will see is 18% of that particular pool is actually HR in the high potential pool. But as you start going up the leadership pipeline, what you will see is at the CXO to CEO level, it dramatically drops down to 1%. So only 1% of HR folks end up having a probability of having a shot at the CEO role, right? What do you think? Do you think HR is losing ambition as it goes? Or what are some things that HR should do to really turn that table over? Because there's a lot of data that showed that when that HR guy took the CEO seat, they were able to grow the business far better than many business leaders.
No, thanks, Amogh. Frankly, I would say a good CEO should answer that question, because being on the other side of the table, I can only add a view in that way. See, one very, very clear take, and if I were to look at personally my experience, HR guys, and maybe this may be a little blunt, but there is a risk-taking ability which normally within the function, when you're there for a pretty long time, HR tends to lose actually. And it starts with not in terms of saying you take a punt on something which you don't know. It actually gets on to even at conversations on the table when you are in the CXOs, say suppose, is not to even take a risk of obviously getting involved in conversations, stating your views which may not be typical people business, but it's around something in business which may be how business gets run. Now, those things may be logical, but some of the times, and I'm very practically saying, most of the HR people would say, it's a quid pro quo game. If I unnecessarily, point my finger at something wrong, HR is the first function which is the most nimble and a soft function where anybody can point holes in that way. So your first risk-taking ability actually starts on that table, where you start to contribute much more. Second, most of the other functions, if you were to see, and typically functions taking over till the top, have been actually at least having some of the other rotations. Rotations which broadens your viewpoint. Not that to say a particular function is better than another function to lead. It's more around to say there is a better idea of how different functions are run. Having run through that, they have done it. Mostly in HR, a lot of people don't go through those functions that much, which is those experiences, basically, not the function. Those are those experiences. And the third thing, if I were to look at it, is constant upgradation of your knowledge of what kind of a clients you have and what you're serving, which is nothing but indirectly, a lot of times technically we put it as business acumen. Business acumen is easier said than done, but it's a continuous process of saying what's happening in business and how does it get run. A lot of sales organizations, you will find it a little more because you have to every day sit on in terms of those reactions which come from the clients. But in some of the times it takes a little time for people to have a natural uncanny ability to it. And the last point is, what's the vision of the person who wants to be a CEO? And I'm going with future and some of those developed economies, not that that's saying that is CEO the ultimate thing, or is it what you enjoy to do, you continue to do that? Now it's a very different thing actually. Saying that is CEO is something what you would want to become, or is it something what you want to do and you are actually master of that and continue doing that because you enjoy that. But so in the end, not to become a CEO is not something which for some of the people is not bad. They enjoy what they want to do. But equally, if you have a vision, is you have to fulfill that trajectory. And therefore that percentage will increase, because in the end, going forward, when we talked about like the balance sheets where intangible assets are gaining much more prominence, the function which is poised to get an importance in future is obviously HR as a function. And therefore, there is a little tweak required in the journey, and I think so they're well poised, anybody who has that aspiration in terms of going there.
Beautifully put. What caught on to me was the point on the business acumen part that you said. And many times I see, and honestly, I sometimes get this feeling that HR at some levels do have an allergy to really getting into understanding the business. And most CHROs or people in the CXO level in large organizations in the HR front are exceptional at that particular piece of managing business acumen or understanding the business. What would be your advice for this group as to how they should develop this?
See, one thing is my personal take I can add is very, very clear is what you are serving, you should know the taste. If you are in a restaurant and you're serving someone, you should know what is the liking and what kind of a food is required. But unless you know what's the liking, the food is not there. Gone are the days where you can only have only a particular buffet and say, this is it. A lot of it is actually changing and the whole new startup is there are many problem statements and you solve it, which is there. And therefore, very important thing is for people to be successful going forward, one thing is agility. Agility of obviously saying even your customer will require new things every day in and day out. Therefore, you better understand what is there. Second is, and here I can tell a little example of our organization where we believed in saying everybody has some of the other talent other than what you're doing in your job. And without taking a name of the brand, where this ad was there where people said you never know what you can become. We launched something like a project economies where the whole concept was around that if you're doing a particular job, like you're part of a particular sales function, and you think you can actually get your hands wet in terms of going through some kind of a back office function which is there, you can very well do it extra over and above your job, contributing your extra hours to it. And net, these projects are nothing but organization short-term or long-term goals linked, and therefore any extra dollar saved or extra dollar earned, you get a percentage of it as a partner. And there is still a safety net of saying even if you don't do it, you still do your core jobs, which is there. We had around 300 senior people from senior managers and above who actually participated, which was actually 95% of the people who participated into that. So even people like in HR, and I have two of them sitting here in this room itself, and Shilpa and Namita, who participated into sales projects in terms of leading how with the institutional as well as retail distributions, how while you're in HR, you really work towards building that up, and they successfully delivered on some of those stuffs. And there are rewards attached to it. So therefore, do dirty your hands in some of the times, some of the opportunities which do come up, wherever they excite you. And another good part of the organization is it should provide that psychological safety. Safety of obviously doing certain failures, but still trusting the people in terms of moving ahead. So it's both the person as well as the organization in terms of which really matters how do people actually move forward in this journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Vikramjeet. I think we have 4 minutes. Let's throw open the floor. Anyone who'd like to ask questions. It's a safe environment where you can ask questions of what you always feared you never had answers for. So over to everyone.
So the room has a full psychological safety environment in that. Yes, Jeff.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned something interesting about CHROs being successors to CEOs, but you mentioned something interesting, Vikramjeet, that I really like, which is that the aspiration and what should it be? Because maybe you just enjoy doing that. Do you feel it's because we may not have as many role models as we need to? Is that possibly why we may not imagine ourselves doing that role? Or you think genuinely it's a profession that you may just love to do and hence, why not?
So Esther, you touch a very valid point because, and if you see a typical human behavior decision making, it's much more than only a CHRO and a role model. A lot which happens in our decision making is our mental filters which are based on our past experiences. All of us as humans in that ways. And in the past experiences, a lot of time you may see a certain role model and therefore you make those choices of saying, and a good answer to that is also when we were kids and a lot of time teachers or otherwise the parents used to ask, what would you want to become? And a lot of time our answers used to be something which we saw were some things which got us excited. Whether those were typical professions earlier to be, you know, a doctor or a police or very young age I'm talking about in that ways, or a nurse or whatsoever in that ways, and we used to get excited. Maybe yes, a lot of those CEOs, which is a changing trend some of the times, while we saw Lena becoming it in the recent past, there have been more than enough. If I remember reading about Bernard, who leads a Spanish cement and a mining company, was a CHRO for a long time, 320,000 people, pretty big, asset bases which they have, including the values which they generate in terms of top line, was a CHRO for a long time and then did that stuff. So thanks, Esther, for bringing that up. A lot of times role models do act as that, but another point to add to a balance is do what really makes you happy, even post seeing those, because while we know Lena, and now I think so the new generation would see her even more, irrespective of the genders, and which will help us. But then there is a lot of times people do make the decisions in terms of saying there is a cost of your time, value, efforts. Is it worth for what you aspire for some of the times? And that's a point which I was bringing on, because somebody may get excited by some things and therefore then pursue it. So my take is what gets you excited, pursue it, including look at role models alongside which may come in, whether as a very tacit play or an explicit play in between. But that should add on. Maybe in future, more CHROs as CEOs in that ways.
Great. Thank you so much, Vikram. We are at the top of the hour, but Vikram is here. So please feel free to reach out and connect with him for any questions post the awards.
See, one of the things, and sorry, before we end it, actually, and while Esther raised her hand, and one of the things which I started initially, because a lot of people here are either HR or HR related in that ways, is the risk of obviously asking a question or nudging on something in a larger forum. Some of the times known, some of the times unknown. And the first start is when people can raise their hand and ask a question. We'll stop it. But I'm just saying, when you're in your organization, this is the first hindrance of moving up where you want to move up, is what our own inertia of obviously saying what I will be viewed as with what I will say. And a lot of times the CEOs are the ones who take risk. Esther runs a company, she's the CEO, she raised her hand first. But I'm just not stereotyping in that way in a successful organization. What's very, very important is we as HR people a lot of times get into a very calculated raise of hands or raise of our voice in that ways. Some of the times it's just let it go, let it loose, and just ask those questions which are in your mind or something which comes in. Will let you become much more better going forward, much more mature in terms of dealing with difference of opinions, and therefore be much more happier over a period of time. Thanks, Amogh.
I wouldn't have expected a more stronger closure than that. Thank you so much for the kind words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amogh. Thank you, Vikramjeet. May I request you to be on stage, please, Amogh, Vikramjeet. So we have a practice at People Matters that we do. After every huddle, we list out a few words that made a difference or made place in our minds. And I listed down a few words from this conversation. Proactive, deep listening, pick a good mentor, CHRO taking the CEO's seat, and that's my favorite. So it looks like taking great responsibilities is now giving us great power. So cheers to that. And moving on, I would like to call our CEO and Editor-in-Chief, Esther Martinez, to join us on stage and say a few words.
Thank you so much. And I actually realize I'm a HR turned CEO, and sometimes as an entrepreneur, you don't think about your past life and you don't think about the fact that you're a CEO, right? So it's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks all of you, and we have a lot of our Are You in the List alumni in this room. If you can identify yourselves, and let's give our alumni a big, big round of applause. And it's a community that we have nurtured together along with DDI, and it's such a privilege to host you. When we connected this with TechHR, it was a great opportunity to kind of bring the whole community together. And thanks, Prabhakar, for being here. You've been part of our jury year after year. So big round of applause to Prabhakar as well for his contribution to these awards. Thank you very much. And we're going to start with the awards for this evening. And any comments? You were a jury member, and you know how tough it was this year. So any comments you want to share before we unveil the winners for tonight?
Thanks, Asha, for asking for this. I really love the process in terms of how people really went through pretty tougher assessment. If I were to say, CHROs don't go through that. so it was a process I believe you all would have enjoyed, because whether you make it or you don't make it, some of the times, it's around in terms of how life continuously tests you in certain ways and helps you to become better. What I could see was the quality is improving year on year, which is there. 2018 I saw, it's 19 I was seeing that actually, which was there. But this time even the quality went up. And it's how our life is also in terms of how it improvises with every time passes by. But it was a lovely experience, and I think so people who made it great and people who couldn't were also so good that some of the other competitions they could easily fly through, and I could see those banners with them in terms of what they did even well in some other places. So hats off to each one of you from that perspective. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things when Vandita flashed that slide, I'm sure many might have had the question, just 4, but these are actually precious 4 pearls. We actually had a tough time to decide as to who should the final winners be. And we said, let it be the ones who truly deserve it. So congratulations to all the winners.
Wonderful. All right, so over to you, Spriya.
Thank you, Esther. And to join us on stage, I would also like to invite CEO and founder of Interview Desk, Mr. Pichumani Durairaj. Please join us on stage. Would you like to say a few words about your experience and how did the entire process of scanning out interviews pan out?
Yeah. First of all, the initiative of Are You on the List itself, it's a great initiative because as an HR, they need recognition and motivation. I think this, first of all, kudos to our entire team. And the process, again, it's been a tough process. And even as Vikram sir said, even if I've been in a position, whether we'll be cracked, yeah, it's a thing, right? Because we have been going through the process and we were also helping with the team in terms of setting up thing. I was just trying to go through the questions. It's not easy, and kudos to the award winners. And we are excited to be part of this journey. And I think People Matter should continue to motivate and bring this every year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now for the awards. So may I please call on stage, I wouldn't say our first winner because all are winners, but first I would like to call on stage Astha Jain, Senior HRBP, Hindustan Unilever Limited. And may I request Vikramjeet to please give the award to Astha.
Thank you, judges. Thank you, panel. And it has been an honor and a privilege to be part of Are You on the List. I've always looked at the previous winners and aspired to be one today. And it's come true. So thank you so much.
The next award is for Sneha Mohanty, HR Leader, Maersk Tankers India. Sneha, please come on stage. And may I request Amogh to please give the award to Sneha.
Thank you so much. I think it feels really privileged to be here today, especially when I get to know that it's 4 winners this year. I have been following People Matters as a student when I was in college, and now I get to be a part of this prestigious award list. It means a lot. So thank you. It has been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Our next winner is some diversity there. Manish Shukla, Manager HR ITC. And may I request Pichumani to please hand over the award to Manish.
Thank you, judges, and thank you, People Matters. This is probably one of the biggest milestone of my life, and it has truly changed. And I would say this is an inflection point in my life, and it has given me a true reflection what you need to do in life. So thank you, People Matters, thank you, DDI, and thank you, Interview Desk. This was one of the rigorous assessment that I've ever attempted in my life.
And we have our 4th winner, Monisha Katyal, Business HR Partner, Intel Technology, who has joined us virtually. So Monisha will be on screen. Oh, there, Monisha is there. Hi, Monisha.
Very happy to be here, and I couldn't be there in person, unfortunately, but very happy to be here virtually to kind of receive this award. So thank you so much. This has been a journey, and this is definitely a very, very prestigious moment for me at this moment in my career. So thank you so much to People Matters.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's take a photo and send it to her. So, would you? Come.
And thank you so much. You've been so generous with your applause. Once more, please, to all the winners, to our jury members, to DDI, and to interview desk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.